Hello, everyone. My name is Mistreated, and I'll be the moderator of this panel, which focuses on discrimination between and against people of Asian and people of African descent. We're going to cover topics that are both related to and unrelated to COVID-19. Quick disclaimer, while our panelists will be sharing their personal views and opinions, their views do not necessarily reflect the views of the entirety of the two demographics. Nevertheless, we hope this discussion will prove helpful and promote more widespread understanding. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and hop on into it by letting our panelists introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ronnie, and I'm a Japanese American.
Hello, my name is Beryl, and I'm first-gen Chinese American.
Hi, my name is Lance, and I am a Korean American.
Hi, I'm Azaria, and I am a Black American.
Hello, my name is Kanaya, and I'm African American.
I will also be participating in the discussion on the Black panelist side. So we're going to go ahead and hop right into it with the first question. So we're going to start off with our Asian panelists and then our Black panelists. How do you feel that you are viewed by other groups, particularly people who are Caucasian American?
I think that Asian Americans and Asians in general are often seen as the quote unquote model minority in America. We're often like the timid and the group not to stand up for themselves. But, this idea that the Asians are the model minority is not only, it's denigrating to not only just Asians, but to all other minorities. And it's a false ideology that because Asians can be successful, then so can all other minorities, which ignores all other discrimination, systemic racism, and disparities in America.
Generally agree with that, I think, for what Ronnie said. It's, to say the least, Asians are definitely, out of like all the other ethnicities, probably viewed on the higher end of the spectrum. There's a lot going for us in terms of like how far culture has spread and how far we've been accepted. In my opinion, like it's just very broad, and a lot that has to do with that is how far our I guess cultural products and like results of globalization have gone. I mean, we have K-pop, we have anime, we have like K-dramas, all of these different forms of media that kind of help perpetuate this like positive image that these East Asianers or other like demographics like in general have this advantage because like other people, other ethnicities have been exposed in some sort of medium already, kind of being able to accept it like from the get-go.
I definitely agree with Ronnie when he said that Asians as the model minority, or that idea, hurts Asians because not only are we not considered a minority, it definitely ignores the wide economic differences between low-income Asians and the more wealthier Asians, because we are very economically divided as a racial group.
Well, in general, a lot of people want to say that they're not racist or anything like that, but they don't want to admit that they also benefit from this system, even though they're not. Some may actually not be racist, some may, but I feel like a lot of people don't want to admit that they actually benefit from this systematic oppression that has been set up by Caucasian white people. I don't know what you want me to say, but so I feel like a lot of people view like, oh, they're not the problem, but they're also not helping to get to a solution. And so I think a lot of people just view Black people, well, African Americans, as like someone they want to help or be friends with, but someone they can't help fix the problem for.
Because on one hand, we're viewed as a threat, whether we're successful or not. If I'm not successful, I'm viewed as like a thug, or, I'm promiscuous, and there are so many stereotypes that are attached to me. But if I am successful, I'm viewed as, stuck up, or I have to let go of my Black identity. But on the other hand, we have this thing where Black people are viewed as if they're always in need. Especially we see this with people going to Africa and, like, oh, let me go help these little African children. because they think that we just need everything handed to us. So that's kind of like how I view or how I see Caucasians, perception of us through a lot of different stereotypes and generalizations.
I agree with that. I know in my life, being in a small town is really mostly white. Been called names like Oreo. If you don't support a certain view, you're called a sellout. If you don't speak a certain way, you're talking white. I don't know how you talk like a color, but that's the thing apparently. And like Azaria said, people are willing to say these things and then claim they're not the problem, but they actually are the problem, and they're helping the problem go along, even they're not participating in these sorts of things. So I definitely agree with what everyone has been saying the whole time with the views of Black people in general. So certain social media pages and public figures have expressed their grievances about the discrimination of people of African descent in China. One of the comments made on a popular post about the subject states, "As a Black American woman, I don't support anyone else but my own people. Black people are way too quick to support other races, and they turn around and treat us like trash." So what are your thoughts on the situation and the comments concerning the situation? We're going to start off with our Black panelists on this one.
So as a way to combat being in a system that is made to put us down for Black people and Black Americans, we want to support each other. And some people, I don't want to say it's an extreme, but some people they hop to saying, I'm going to support purely Black companies, Black owned things. And by doing that, yes, you're helping the people. Yes, you're helping your own community and own race get uplifted and out of this gutter that we've been placed in. But I also feel like not supporting any other people is not the right answer to it. There's the answer's it's kind of half and half. Yeah, this supporting Black owned businesses can be a way of helping our own community and race who's been hit just hit down into the gutter. But not supporting anyone else, I feel is a very drastic thing to do. And cutting off everyone else is a very drastic thing to do, because that generalization is, it's just, I feel it's too big to generalize everything like that. Yes, Black people and just people in general have gone out to help other people, and everything may not be what we wanted in return, but in my opinion, it's this right now, but I'm gonna go to the golden rule. It's the golden rule: do unto you what you want other people to do to you. And yes, that's a good rule to live by, but at the end of the day, not everyone's gonna be nice to you. So why be rude to people if they're gonna be rude to you? I'd rather just be nice to you and let you go about your day instead of trying to cut you down to my level. So that's my answer to that question.
Off of what Azaria just said, I do believe that, because although I understand where that person is coming from, I see a fundamental problem in ignoring the problems of other groups, and also expecting those groups to kind of back us. Because see, I think if we show so much support for these other ethnic groups, then maybe they will start supporting us more. And if we are constantly putting down other ethnic groups, but also hoping those ethnic groups will be respectful towards us, then we're part of the problem. You can attribute it to kind of like how this, but you have racism. Black people are always anti-racism, but then they will fail to support people within the LGBT community that are also Black. So I feel it's the same idea of if you don't want people discriminating against you, but you don't want to fight the discrimination of other groups. And I have an issue with that.
About the problem or complaining within their own community instead of talking to the people on the other side, which is a flaw. You can't complain about a problem if you have not talked to someone about the problem, for number one. Number two, a lot of the ones coming back with these kinds of statements already have racism on the inside towards these certain groups, and they're just basically using it as an opportunity to, pop off. This is how I view it. Maybe I'm wrong in some cases, but most of the cases I've seen so far have been people who already had racist views towards it.
I wanted to like just piggyback a little bit off of what Kanaya, is that how you pronounce it? Kanaya said about like the Black community. I found, I don't want to speak for the whole community, but I found in a lot of areas that like, you know, they're quick to be like, no one's here to help us, or no one's here to support us, so we have to support our own. But then when they find people of their own community that also relate to different communities like LGBT or disabled or any other group that is like not represented properly, that also can fall within Black culture and Black community, some people are just not quick to understand or support that person. And I just feel like, how can you say, but like, how can you not be willing to like give and support a person who's going through the like similar trials as you for not being understood, being canceled out, or being singled out when you yourself are going through that same problem, just differently applied?
Like how this is going, because it kind of reflects my own views, like, but I don't know how to phrase it properly. I'm not sure if it's going to come across as kind of like rude or something, but I feel like when it comes to struggles that people go through and like seeing it in someone else, like there's like that 50-50, right? Some people do recognize like, oh, they're going through what I'm going through, even if it's like they're a different group or anything, but like I'm going to support them because of that, right? But like at the same time, I also feel like some issues are made even more complicated by the fact that people are, I guess, sticking to this mental guideline, like this very rigid thought process where like we need to draw it to like racial boundaries, when I feel like people are overthinking it and we just need to step back and think we're all people that are going through problems in like this modern day society. It doesn't matter if we're different like in other regards, as long as we have this one common connection. Like that should be all it's to. Like, you're going through what I'm going through, we understand each other, support each other, stuff like that, you know?
Kind of going back to the golden rule that Azaria was talking about, the comment that you read out, is it Tim, how do you say your name?
Prometheus.
Prometheus. I disagree with the comment that you read out, because if you try to fight fire with fire and hate on a group because or not support them because they didn't support you back, that will never end. So instead of trying to look at the past and be vengeful or hateful, moving forward is like what we should focus on. And solely supporting your racial group and none others is very dividing, and that doesn't work in a diverse country like ours, or in an interconnected global society.
Comment. I think there's like a fundamental flaw in this logic, because this treatment in China is, first of all, it's like 7,000 plus miles away from the United States. So it doesn't justify like stop supporting Asian Americans who are not related to this event in China at all. Like, just because the Chinese government and also several Chinese businesses showed racist acts against the African foreigners in China, you know, like we aren't related to that. So I don't understand how she can go from, you know, she won't support Asian racism against Asians due to coronavirus. Like, you know what I'm trying to say here? It's just, I don't, there's no like correlation here at all. And like, secondly, like a lot of the Chinese civilians and general population, they don't, like, we forget that a lot of the Chinese citizens sort of hold complaints, and they don't necessarily agree with the Chinese government, and like the Chinese government like censoring and arresting, like the Hong Kong protests, they arrest people for anyone who speaks out against them. So like I honestly wasn't surprised to see that type of actions from the Chinese government, considering that they don't even treat their own citizens with respect. So like, I mean, at that point though, but like to get back to the point, like that incident isn't really related to the Asian American.
I wanted to pick back up on what Beryl, is that? Okay, great. And what she said about like just being divided will not work, especially for a lot of, well, I want to say a lot of countries, but for a good amount of them, especially the USA. we're a melting pot. You can't, like, you can have cultural differences, and we can like praise each other and appreciate each other's cultural differences, but we cannot thrive or get anywhere as a country just being divided like that, with that same mindset that that person who made that comment has. And honestly, I think if we did have that current mindset, if everyone had that current mindset, this place would be a mess. Like, nothing would ever get done, because someone always has some prejudice against someone else in their workplace, or someone they see on the street, or like their freaking taxi driver. Like, you're always on edge, and it's not great.
I wanted to respond to something that Lance said. I know he was talking about how we shouldn't necessarily look at this as necessarily like a big race issue because we have this common connection. But I guess my question was, what happens when one group is more disproportionately affected by one thing? And I think that's when it becomes a race issue, because you have to understand why that particular group is disproportionately affected as opposed to other groups.
What Ronnie said kind of just reminded me that, like, well, just kind of piggybacking off what he said, you shouldn't think of what one person or a few people think or say as representative of an entire community, because that's just not how it works, especially when it comes to racism. Because one or a few Asian Americans you see are racist, or any other group, that doesn't mean the entire race is against another racial group. And to just treat people as individuals instead of like blending and generalizing.
Move on to the next question. So this one's going to go to the Asian panelists first. How do you feel about the current negative treatment of Asian Americans due to the spread of coronavirus?
Well, I mean, obviously it's terrible, but like a lot of it's, you know, like, as going back to the model minority thing, like we're seen as the model minority, and then some, not all Asians, but some Asians like to write off of that. I've seen what do you call it, like attitudes from some Asian people being like, oh, well, we're better than Black and Latino people, so like, oh, we shouldn't care about their problems, right? Like, we shouldn't necessarily support them because we're like the superior, the better one, and like we don't have their issues because we struggled and like we did whatever. And then, but then as soon as this incident happens, you see the effect that like we're not actually the model minority, that like the model minority mostly comes from like white ideology that like to undermine other struggles, they'll be like, oh, we have one minority succeeding, so therefore there is no struggle if one minority can succeed. If Asians can succeed, then Black and Latino people can also succeed, so we should just ignore your problems. And like, you know, it's sort of like a tactic to ignore problems. But then all of that model minority stuff goes away after this incident, right? Like, we see a huge uprising, attacks, like, you know, like stabbing 2-year-olds and like pouring acid on a woman, taking out the trash, and like, you know, whatever. So I think the Asian people in general, mostly Eastern Asians, because right now, like, it's like seen as a China problem, right? So like, but there has even been attacks against like South Asians, like Indians and Pakistanis, for some reason, because like there's this incident gives them an excuse for racist people to do these types of attacks. And I think Asian people need to realize that we can't accept this position that, oh, we're the model minority, so we need to ignore struggles when we endure the same struggles ourselves in our communities. Like, you know, like there's like a huge amount of ethnic subgroups of Asians, right? And like they all suffer differing amounts of discrimination. I think we need to realize that we need to stop taking this narrative that we're the best minority out there and that therefore we can ignore other minorities. We can't take that idea anymore, and we need to take this incident right now as a learning lesson that we need to continually fight for the equality of everybody, so we don't run into this again where we have, you know, certain large public speakers and people of power saying, convincing people that it's a certain minorities group's fault, and then we get all this, you know, damage.
Beryl?
I think with the vast majority of prejudice and discrimination or racism, it comes with a lack of understanding and knowledge. For example, I've heard of people saying that Chinese people are dirty, or all diseases come from China, like from a video. And that's simply not true. If people take the time to understand and learn, I think that racism would lessen at the very least. And another thing I think caused this increase or surge in racism towards Asians is people are scared and they want a scapegoat. So it's easy to just target a specific group and be like, it's all their fault, and direct their anger towards them. Along with that, a lot of people in power, like Ronnie said, are also not understanding or don't want to understand. And so when you hear things like it's the Chinese virus instead of calling it for its name and all these other things, that sends the wrong message to the American public or the public in general.
It's just the fact that people are looking for a scapegoat, and like as people get more scared, they tend to look into groups, not only to blame, but also like in themselves to like start categorizing people in. And honestly, like my thoughts on it are just that it's rough, but people need to start learning that it's not about groups. It's not about how specific people are like this. It's just that everyone has their different conditions. Everyone is in their own, in itself, their own individual, right? Like you can't blame one person for a whole group. It's just unfair. And I don't know really what else to say, because it seems like Beryl and
I agree, like with a lot of what everyone said. People are looking for a scapegoat, and it's like now that they can't blame it on their usual group of people that they want to blame things on for, they choose a new group, which would be the Asians, to blame on. And it just adds to the new problems that each minority has to deal with being a minority. And I just think it's honestly ridiculous. Like the fact that people have been calling it the Wuhan virus or the Asian virus, but there's a clause within when it comes to naming viruses that you're specifically not to name it after the location it came from, specifically to to try not to avoid things like this where you like pick out or pick apart different different groups to blame, because it's not their fault. One person's actions is not the whole community's fault. And so I think honestly it's ridiculous, and I'm not surprised by it, this treatment, but I'm definitely disappointed in it, because if you look at America's history, it's not nothing new. We're just repeating itself.
So I would have to agree with a lot of the, all of the previous made statements. It's absolutely devastating to see the treatment of Asians as well as Asian Americans. And I think the best way I've seen it put, even though there has been physical attacks as well, the normalization of non-aggressive discrimination. And that's the whole thing where it's like, oh, well, you're Asian, you're not allowed to come into my shop and stuff like that. And you think you're doing some kind of safety precaution by doing this, but when in actuality, you're showing a form of discrimination. And I hate that. And I think it shows a lot of miseducation around the virus itself. There, with Twitter culture and social media, there's a lot of spread of miseducation, and a lot of this disrespect is played off as a joke, because that's a lot of ways that people know how to represent their anxiety. They joke about it and they target certain groups, not realizing how detrimental it can be, because people are taking what you may post on Reddit or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and they're running with it, and they're verbally and physically abusing other people because of that. And I think it's a huge problem that needs to be addressed.
That's actually a perspective that I haven't considered. I do agree, and I agree with everything everyone has said. In addition, I think it's interesting, considering the comment mentioned in the last question. that Black people have also been participating in this discrimination, both passive and aggressive. So I think it's kind of ironic that people are claiming that basically our entire community is good with everyone, when that's not true. We have some racist Black people. I'm just gonna put it plain, older Black people, some younger, depending on where you're from. It's just racism, like a generalized thing, is everywhere. And well, we're seeing it now. Like, there's no one's really safe from it. It's gonna hit everyone at some point. And I say everyone, I mean every group, not every individual person. Everyone is at some point kind of, participating in those acts and those discussions that promote racism. And so that's sort of what I get from this situation. It's kind of hypocritical.
Hit on, and let's see if I remember them both. So with what I'm sorry, Kanaya, what she was saying is that a lot of people, they go to forms of joke or like non-aggressive forms of racism or just discrimination, and like that has been normalized so much. It's honestly one of the most easiest ways to receive racism, because it happens within your work, everywhere. It happens everywhere. And like, not allowing someone to eat at your restaurant is not going to stop you from thinking about from thinking or seeing that person in a certain way, or simply it's not going to stop you from getting coronavirus. It's like a group. The only way you can really stop that or combat that is if you like come to a situation with an open mind. And a lot of those people who use passive aggressive ways or non-physical ways of aggression to people, they're not willing to do. There are a lot of hypocrites right now, and I honestly don't see it. I don't get it. Like, how can you be hypocritical of a person when you've gone through a certain struggle at some point? Like, everyone, I don't want to say this is a low, but like everyone has been hit hard. And so therefore it puts them in like this state of mind where it's like really not well for them, because like some people can be walking down the street and then they get threatened by the life, and now they have to go home and stay inside.
I'm glad you did bring up the like the issue with Black people being disrespectful towards Asians and Asian Americans, because I think that was the saddest part for me out of all the levels of discrimination that I saw. And especially because I actually attend Spelman, which is an all-girls historically Black college, and they actually felt the need to send out an email against like some of this anti-Asian bigotry. And these are supposed to be African-American females that are very understanding of other people's cultures, and they even felt the need to say something about Black people showing all these levels of discrimination. And I know one thing they did say was they talked about how this racism diverts energy and focus from addressing the emergence of the virus. And I think, a lot of this this sentiment, this anti-Asian sentiment, has diverted, exactly what they said, diverted energy away from fixing the problem itself. Because when you're attacking all these different people, saying that, oh, they created this virus, and like creating all these different conspiracy theories, you're not actually creating the vaccine by saying this. You're just adding to the fuel that is this fire.
Yeah, just to add on to all that, like firstly with the non-aggressive forms of like verbal racism, like it's definitely still damaging, because it sort of reinforces the thoughts of people who actually will commit like physical actions against other people. Like, this goes with any form of racism, like sort of reinforcing the idea of like, oh, just making jokes like, oh, it's a Chinese virus, or like, naming things like, you're like, oh, well, it's just words, it can't really damage anybody. But they sort of forget that like there's people who sit at home watching the news, reading the internet, whatever, and then they start seeing this, and then next time they see an Asian person, they're like, they said that it comes from you guys, and then it sort of attacks, it leads to like physical damages. And as a second point, I think it was, wait, you say Timotheus? Is that how?
Yes, sir.
All right. So as you said, you know, like the hypocrisy of like going against another minority when you face the same struggles. I want to say that there's like a small grain of truth that within the Asian community, from what I've seen, I don't want to, you know, like paint everyone, but there's like a grain of truth in that, because there's a lot of racism within the Asian community, sort of like relating to colorism, and not even colorism. Like there's a lot of tensions between Japanese and Chinese and Korean, and like you'd be like, to a outsider, they're like, oh, they all look the same. But in Japan or China, I don't know about China, but in Japan, there's a lot of racism against other Asians, even Eastern Asians who look the same, quote unquote. And then I think Asians in general, and then sometimes that's carried over in Asian Americans. I want to make the distinction that like Asians and Asian Americans have slightly different thoughts. Like most Asian Americans are slightly more progressive in their thinking and like less racist. But like the first gen, like I'm first gen, and like, you know, parents and stuff, they still carry these ideas. And I think Asians need to realize that to other people, we all look the same. We need to like that's sort of like the thing, right? Like, oh, you're Chinese, like you get called Chinese. I'm like, well, I'm not Chinese. But anyways, Asians need to realize that to other people, all Asians are sort of the same, especially Eastern Asians. We're all the same, and we'll all receive damage from the racist attitudes of other people. And like, as we've seen, like when people start calling it the Chinese virus, we start seeing attacks against Japanese, Korean, Burmese people, like people who aren't even Chinese, right? So I think this shouldn't only be like a lesson for like other minorities in general, is that we need to support equality for racism within our own communities, and that we need to unify, and you know, because at the end of the day, we're all going to suffer from all whatever is happening, because we're all seen as the same, even though we might not see each other as the same. I think we need to start realizing that.
I agree, and honestly, Ronnie, you're saying this, and I'm feeling really like motivated to go do something now. But like, yeah, no, you're right, and I feel like I have seen several situations where this double standard between like one group struggles and like another group struggles, which is like the same thing, it's like the double standard is very present if you look in specific areas and like demographics and stuff. But in general, it's just really like, it's less about like the jokes and stuff like itself having an impact or damage, right? But it's more about like the mindset that they're conveying, because it's like, oh yeah, haha, your eyes are kind of like you know, it's like, maybe it doesn't seem that like damaging or rude, but it's really degrading, and in general it shows a mindset that you're kind of like, I'm making fun of you for what you are. And it also is like, in a way, indirectly putting, hey, I am above you to be able to make jokes about who you are. Like, it's different if you have like an established like friend group that's like, hey, yeah, no, like we make fun of like, oh, like maybe he looks a bit Chinese or Korean more so than the other. We make fun of him for that. Like if it's a group thing that's like that's a general consensus, everyone agrees to it, like, yeah, you can. And the person themselves is willing, like, you can do this to me specifically, then it's like, yeah, that's fine. But people need to realize that these jokes and like passive aggressive discriminations need to be taken very lightly, because we need to make sure we're not stagnating, right? We need to be constantly moving forward in this kind of progressive way where we won't have to worry about racism or anything like that. We're just worried about like, hey, is this person cool? Do I want to hang out with them? That's it, right? Like we shouldn't have to go beyond that. And I think that it's important that we really know like and work on like toning down these types of attitudes, so we can get to that point where it honestly, like, everyone has their own cultures and we can all respect that and move on.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next question. Kind of bouncing off of some of what was mentioned and the last question by some of our panelists. How do you think, and it's actually gonna go to both panelists, so how do you think your family would react to you dating an Asian person, from our Black panelists, and Black from Asian panelists? And how do you feel that colorism affects who you decide to date and or who decides to date you?
So actually, I actually listen to K-pop and K-drama. And so not listen to K-drama, watch K-drama. But like, and like I try to share like that part of it with my family, and they're like, well, I don't really get it. And I'm like, okay, well, dang, now I have no one to share it with. But so like, honestly, so like my point is like, they wouldn't be like, oh wow, look at this person. I didn't know, because like I didn't know she would have an Asian boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. But my thing is, I feel like they wouldn't really be that surprised, because first of all, I like to surround myself with a lot of different ethnicities in general, or different parts of cultures and people. And so I feel like they really wouldn't be like too surprised by it. But like, honestly, with everything that's in place nowadays, I just feel like it's like the outside people that like would judge, you know, like someone that you don't know that's like walking up to you asking you why you have someone that's not your own race as your significant other. Like that ideal, that not the ideal, that that mindset that like, you know, you must date someone that's your own race. That's my own point of view. I don't particularly care. Don't think my family would particularly care. But it's just that like my concern is that people from the outside where I go, and like the communities I'm in, will they judge me, and will they be harsh towards me and my family for having someone that's that's just not my own race in general. So
ideas down so I wouldn't lose them. Okay, so how would my family respond to me dating an Asian person? I don't think my family would not approve, but a person would feel being a part of my family. I don't think my family could be like comfortable with you know, like doing certain things and like cooking certain foods. And I don't know, like, you know how when you allow someone to be a part of your family kind of like loosens up. And I don't want my family to always feel like they have to be like 110 all the time. Like they can't be themselves. But also, you know, of course, Zaria brought up the judgment. I don't think my family would necessarily judge it, but I do think other people within the Black community would definitely look at me like, oh, she be white or something, you know, like what is she doing, you know, dating outside the race? And then like people start saying, oh, Black love doesn't exist, like, oh, you trying to, you know, whiten the gene pool, you know, all that, you know, that bigotry that we get into. What I also don't want is the jokes that come with it. You know, I don't want my family or, you know, anybody associated with me to make, you know, unnecessary like Asian stereotype kind of jokes, even though they are trying to be comfortable, but it makes things more awkward. I feel like there's a lack of inclusion. Like they're always going to feel like they're not really a part of my family because they're just going to stand out no matter what. Like, yeah, I don't have members in my family that have dated outside their race extensively. So I think they would not necessarily feel comfortable, but also me meeting their family would be an issue as well. I don't know if I'm going off on a tangent, but I know Black people aren't necessarily always well perceived by Asian families. And I would be afraid of them not accepting me and having to deal with that for the rest of my life. Well, for one, I don't want to be dated as a fetish. I don't want someone to be like, oh, I want a Black girl, I'm gonna go get me a Black girl. You know, I know I'm being out there, but I'm just being serious. Because, you know, if you date me as like, you know, a check off your box, then, you know, you're not, you know, dating me. There is this weird perception of mixed children within the Black community. And I don't want to go too far on this, but people will be like, oh, I really want a mixed girl. Like I really want like a mixed child so they can have good hair and all these different attributes that come with, you know, the mixing of races, especially if you're going to have, you know, like a child with someone that is Asian, because, you know, they see, oh, like, Latin babies are so beautiful, so I'm going to seek out an Asian person to give me a child. And that's just a weird thing for me. Yeah, I don't like that.
I'm gonna start by saying I think at this point it's expected of me to, because if you look at my friend circle, it's really diverse. So there's no one in the majority. And so with that being true, so I guess you can technically say the majority of my friends are not Black because I have a mixture of everyone. So I think at this point people sort of expect that, which I guess makes sense. My family, within my family, I would say I have the most, from what I can tell, the most diverse friend group, relationships. And so I would expect many of them, even if it's not intentional, it could be unconscious, to have certain thoughts, judgments, and biases concerning that. So, but I really don't care. If I want to date someone, I will. Like, I don't give a flip. Um, Now, where am I going with that? Okay, concerning the how they would fit in my family, that depends, because that depends on where that person grew up. Because I have met some Asian people who grew up mostly around Black people, so they would know how to navigate themselves, and it wouldn't be that easy for them to like blend into that sort of environment. So it really just depends. I don't want to automatically say, "Oh, there's an Asian person not going to fit in. I'm not going to fit into their family." It's not necessarily true. It might be the minority. I'm not entirely sure, but there are some people who are just very very well versed. Like Kazaria, for example, is like really into other cultures, into K-pop, into um, I forgot other things she said, but she's really into those sorts of things, and she tries to surround herself with different kinds of people. I feel like that sort of happens sometimes in other communities too, so we shouldn't automatically assume that it's not. It's a valid concern. So if I were to enter an interracial relationship, my first question would be, have they dated someone Black before? Have they had Black friends in the past? So that gives you like an really in the present, that gives you kind of like an idea of where they're coming from and how it's going to be for you, whether or not you're an experiment, whether or not you're a fetish, you know? And side note, if I ever am interested in someone, I will look at a social media to see who they're taking pictures with. You know, are all their friends white? You know, are their friends of a certain group? And I guess you look at where they're coming from too. They're from a different country, then you can expect certain things. But if they're from New York City, when it's not really a true excuse, then I'm gonna look at that. You know, so I completely understand where Kanai was coming from with that. Concerning, there was two more things. Well, yeah, concerning fetishes, yeah, that's a problem, and I have blocked people for those sorts of things. That was just like a reflex. um, and colorism. Okay, so that's interesting. Because I think specifically within the Black community, colorism is a thing. And of course, I'm gonna see it from a certain perspective because I have lighter skin, and I think there's a stigma for some people, I guess, that they say they've been bullied for having darker skin. And I'm saying they say as in, I'm saying that because I've never participated at bullying, you know? I think everyone's hot, everyone's beautiful. So there's never really crossed my mind. I have had siblings though who are bullied for having lighter skin and thinking she was better than everyone. So I do think it's definitely prevalent, and it's going back to the hip, hypocrisy that I mentioned earlier. We're complaining about being discriminated against, but in some cases, first of all, we're firing back when we don't have to. In some cases, I'm gonna be honest, sometimes we make up discrimination in our own heads when it's not what's happening with anyone, you know? So yeah, I think that's something to think about. And people might see this and think, oh, what did he just say? But it's true. Some of you are creating scenarios in your head, and you need to work on that. I suggest therapy.
So like to hit back on what both of you guys said, I didn't like touch on the other parts, but like making sure like that person, whoever, if I were dating outside of my race, to feel comfortable, because like I have siblings that have brought who date outside of their race. Well, like, and like when they come around, they just feel uncomfortable because they're the only person. And so like if you're the first person to like bring someone home and like, you know, in a serious way, they're always going to feel a bit uncomfortable because, you know, they don't look like the rest of you guys. And like, that's something that like a lot of people are going to have to deal with that I didn't think about when answering that question. And like when it comes to colorism, I really, that whole idea just really makes me like angry, because it's like the idea of colorism and dating someone and then like dating someone of a race and then specifically picking out the lighter shade in hopes to like, you know, face less racism or like whatever you have internalized in yourself that you need to get like looked at. It just really makes me angry to think about. So
due to the perception of Black men and how they treat Black women are pushed to date outside their race at like, it's kind of uncomfortable, you know, they call them like swirlers and stuff like that. And like there's a lot of Black women that will be like, you know, I just hate Black men, like you need to get you an Asian, you got to get you a white man or something like that. But also, even though I don't know if colorism would necessarily affect my relationship unless like someone was dating me and said that, you know, I'm only dating you because you're light skinned and I don't want a dark skinned person.
Okay, so there is a thing, and TikTok brought it right on out that some Black men will only date lighter skinned Black women or women of different ethnicities. I saw somewhere, I forgot where I saw it, but basically some people think they see darker skin as more masculine, lighter skin as more feminine. And I'm not sure where I saw that and where they went with that. But I think, first of all, that's interesting and something that should be talked about some more, because of course this is dumb. Another thing, and bouncing off of that, I have seen people on social media, people I was formerly connected to on social media, thankfully, say things about lighter skinned Black men not being as masculine as darker skin. So it goes back to that whole masculine, darker skin, more feminine, lighter skin, which is kind of like the reverse colorism. You know, we're you know, they have the colorism against people who have darker skin, but then it's also the reverse. So that's another aspect of hypocrisy. Bouncing off of that bounce, while Black men, a lot of them will only date lighter skinned Black women and women of different ethnicities, they will then go and criticize those Black women who will date outside of their race. More hypocrisy.
I wanna touch back on like the idea of like mixed kids and like what colorism ties back to. It's like the whole point of colorism is just a lot of people are just trying to have they're just trying to, I don't know if they know it or not, but like when it comes to colorism, if you're a person that like believes in colorism and things like that, and like that being a lighter color makes you automatically better, it's like you're also participating you're also participating in this like systematic oppression, because you're trying to play the part of seeming better because you're with or you have a child that is lighter than your complexion, and you're like also playing back into that. And then the idea of fetishizing girls of like really almost any age based upon their skin color, if they're lighter or not, is just really infuriating, because like regardless, kids should be able to be kids, and like, you know, they shouldn't be made to represent that you dated a white girl or an Asian person or, I don't know, an Irish person, I don't know. So
Okay, half of this entire side of the panel, we sincerely apologize for hogging the conversation thus far.
Okay, so it's been a while since you first asked the question, so I'm gonna try to focus on what you asked. But if I'm like off topic and you want me to redirect me, let me know. So on colorism, based on my experiences as a first-gen Asian American, I've definitely seen it within the Asian community. I personally do not believe in colorism. Just want to get that out there. But I have seen and heard of like the lighter you are, the better. And that does translate to like how some Asians see African Americans or Blacks. Back to the dating thing, I personally wouldn't care what color somebody is, but I feel like my parents would. And some of you guys talked about being uncomfortable because of cultural differences, because of generations of beliefs. While compatibility is important, being uncomfortable is part of progression. So some discomfort should be welcomed. And I just wanted to say that racism is very much systematic, and to break that cycle and only like dating within your own race, which I don't completely agree with or agree with at all, that discomfort will come if you are willing to date outside your race and be open-minded.
So this question is really personal. I don't need to imagine the first part because it's already happened. And sorry, this is sort of hard, but I don't really care, you know, like about the race or whatever. But like when I brought up to my parents of the people that I've dated before, like I don't want to. One of them was very disapproving, and they said a lot of mean things that I will never forget. And it sort of discouraged me a lot because now I think like whoever I do date seriously in the future, I can never bring them home, or else she's gonna face the scrutiny from the specific person, my one specific parent. And I don't know, it's just it's a frustrating topic because like I'm like, why does it matter? Like, first of all, like mostly throughout my life, all my school has been diverse, but like my middle school and high school is mostly, there's like no Asians, first of all. I'm just gonna say that. And second of all, my high school is predominantly Black, but there's like some white people too. So like that's like the main people, right? And I'm just like of the few Asians that exist. So I didn't think that they would be surprised by that when I told them, right? But obviously I'm wrong. But it's sort of frustrating to see like why you would be so ignorant to the fact that I don't even know. Like it's just dumb to me. And then as you said, like I don't care what my family thinks about who I date or whatever anymore. And it's sort of just like something that I've come to accept. And then regarding like colorism, like yeah, there's definitely colorism within the Asian community as well. Like from what I've seen at my school, there's a somewhat significant South Asian population. So like when I say there's no Asians, there's not a lot of Eastern Asians or Southeast Asians. Okay, there's some Southeast, but like the Indian and like Pakistani people I know, they're like there's like a lot of stigma around like lighter skinned Indian people too. Like, oh, like, you know, you want a lighter, you know, so I understand that as well. So it's sort of frustrating for me to have to see this happen, you know, in the current day and age. And I'm like, we're all like facing somewhat the same struggles. And so I don't understand why you would have these issues with dating, but like it still exists, obviously.
If you don't mind answering it, do you feel like that particular parent would have preferred you to be dating a white girl?
So yeah, so it's sort of complex, marginally, but this parent, she sort of dislikes every other race except Japanese people. That's sort of the thing. So like white person, I think I don't know because I haven't done it, but I think it would be like marginally better. But at the end of the day, I think there will be a similar story.
Got you. The person I was talking to, he was mixed race, Asian, of Asian culture and white. And one of their parents were like, they want them to date within their Asian culture, that they prefer them to date someone within that culture. But another conversation, that person said their parent wants them to date like only white and that Asian culture, or anyone related to that, yeah, for example. But I found that interesting, that although the idea was to stay within the race, the only exception to that was if it's a white person. Which is why I asked that question. So I've just seen that a lot. I think it goes back to sort of like the colorism type deal. White people, lighter skin. I could be wrong about that though.
So I just kind of find this interesting, and like I've kind of been like thinking it through my head, because like speaking personally, like I think in general, my parents, and like my parents tried to be very open-minded about like my generation, like my cousins, my sister, me, and like they try, right? It's just a matter of it's also like just also kind of making me contemplate, because I feel bad, but like speaking from my own preferences, like I find East Asian like appearances wise to be more attractive for me personally. Like I would still be down to like be like friends and stuff, but like it feels awkward to say that like when I look to, if I'm looking for a relationship, I'm looking for someone who first like it's that like, oh, I can be best friends with this person for life level, and then like also like do their like, you know, it's hard for me to explain, and I'm just kind of like spitballing right now, but because it sounds like for me, I feel bad for saying it, but like with everyone talking about how they're dating like outside of their culture, like you guys are, Ronnie's like talking about dating someone outside like East Asian, and his parents like reacted to that, right? And like for me it's just been very open, but like at the same time I personally do lean that way, because not like overall, like I'd still be, it's still on the table, but like physically, like attract, like appearance wise, I do prefer like a certain type, right? So
Okay.
I don't know how to express this properly, I guess.
Maybe this question will help, maybe it won't. Okay. What specific traits are you referring to?
I guess one would be kind of like the cultural upbringing in a way, like the way people carry themselves out, like specifically some like that match the upbringing I was brought up in, like appeals to me more than others. Like for example, there's like the white household where they might have certain cultural values in the way they act, right? They might be more like open, or like they might be more like outspoken, stuff like that, right? But speaking personally, like I grew up in kind of like a somewhat reserved manner, so like I do kind of have learned to like be open-minded, but I also like to keep my opinions to myself sometimes, depending on how like close I am with you. Like this is new, like I have not talked with a lot of you here at all, and here I am talking about like what I feel and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, hold on, I need to rewind a bit, I lost my train of thought there. It's like that aspect of culture as well as physical appearances wise, like I can't pinpoint specifically, but I just find it more like self-satisfactory for me to feel like I'm with like another Asian person. Like I don't mean to be rude or anything, it's just like preference wise, I like the Asian look better than like white or, you know, like black, stuff like that, right? Like just in general. So I'm sorry if that's like rude or like racist or anything, but like it's like a personal thing. Like I am personally interested in Asians more than others.
And I appreciate your honesty. I asked that question because I've actually had this conversation with a lot of different people. And what I find is, I could be wrong, you know, this is what I've seen so far. Because I think it's your first time having this sort of conversation, so you might have trouble breaking it down. I'm the kind of person who's always breaking down every single thought that goes through my head. And I found that some of the traits that we expect one culture to have, we can see in other cultures as well. And it's a good thing you said it's still on the table, because some people grew up the same way you grew up, and they might be black, might be white. Some of them might have a certain look and be white. Some of them might have a certain look. They might look white. I've seen Asians who look white, who are still Asians, you know, but they didn't look like Asians. So that's why I ask those questions, like what specific traits you're talking about, because body shape, skin tone, to an extent, eye shape can be found over across the board. So I think there's just something to think about. Like it would be sort of limiting to keep it there. I would try to break down what traits I'm talking about, because that might broaden, I don't know, the opportunities for dating and kind of help you understand why you said it and understand yourself overall.
I think it's also like just like to kind of bring it more into perspective. Like I myself live in a very like Asian dominant community, like, and I have been surrounded by a lot of friends who are Asian, just because like just the way the culturally it is, like the more like I find myself to be having hobbies that are a lot in line with a lot of like the general Asian population. So that's why like I personally have a friend group of like all Asians. That's why I find it more appealing to be with Asians, I think, because I've grown up in that. Like, and I do want to make it clear that like I am open. Like I'm very like considerate, and I do like understand what you're coming from. It's just from my perspective right now, like until I meet someone who makes me want to like change my perspective there, like this is my current view, and I'm completely open for it to be changed, I guess I should be saying. Like, kind of get what I'm saying ish?
I completely get what you're saying. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because I actually talked to a Black guy who grew up around white people. And so guess who he prefers? Interesting. So I think that's natural. I think everyone pretty much does that. I think for me is because I'm nosy, I purposely sought out people from different places. And so that's why I have this whole view of beauty. And I guess to an extent, media definitely influenced it. I was into a lot of different things when I was younger. So the whole concept of not having representation, I'm just now catching up to that because I've always seen so many different beautiful people from different cultures. And so the fact that not everyone is seeing that amazes me. So yeah, I definitely get that. And the fact that you're still minded about that definitely, in my opinion, shows that I won't say it's coming from a racist place at all or offensive place. It's just what you've been exposed to, and you can't really help what you've been exposed to an extent.
I just wanted to address what Lance had said. There's a difference between having a preference and a type and discriminating against entire groups of people. So if you have a type, and that's completely fine. One reason why the majority of people, I think, well, the majority of people date within their own racial group is not necessarily discrimination, but because as humans, we like things that are familiar to us, and we date people with similar values. So that's kind of like just addressing Lance, like you don't need to apologize or anything. Another thing is I sensed a lot of frustration when Ronnie was talking about like why people don't understand dating outside of our racial group. And a lot of that is due to generations of cultural and traditional beliefs. And I feel like the best way to address that is to first understand where they're coming from, because to change anything, you first have to understand them, and then do our own part by educating ourselves and those that we can.
I would first like to give praise to Beryl for something that she said earlier, because I actually wrote it down. You said being uncomfortable is a part of progression. I absolutely love that. And it's a perspective I didn't really think about because I was afraid of, experiencing that discomfort and like someone else experiencing that same discomfort. But that discomfort is growth. We have to be uncomfortable, to see that kind of change and to, kind of mold our, make that connection between our different cultures more comfortable for other people to experience. If you never were uncomfortable, then, those different cultures will never, find a way to accept Black people within them. So I really like that. This was a long time ago, but Timotheus, you were talking about why darker skinned women were perceived as more masculine, and I actually do have an explanation for that. I think it comes from different, during periods of slavery, the darker skinned women were the ones out in the field while lighter skinned women were seen as, house slaves. So they did more dainty and feminine, and they were dressed up and treated well. So I think that's why that level of colorism exists, and why darker skinned women are perceived as more masculine, because they had a more masculine job to do. And there was no distinction in the field between, oh, you're a female versus you're a male. It was just, you're a Negro and that's what you do. Whereas in the house, you had a very specific job.
I also like what Beryl had to say about some discomfort should be expected, because without that discomfort there would honestly be no growth. And so I felt like that's a point that we should really recognize. And then that was my point.
Next question. We're going to start with our Asian panelists on this one. Do you believe that affirmative action is fair for your ethnic group? If not, what solutions do you suggest?
Yeah, I think it's fair because affirmative action seeks to alleviate socioeconomic injustices that still occur today. Like today, we still see a lot of segregated schooling. But before college, you see a lot of segregating schooling, and often it's also known as like school redlining, similar to normal redlining. And these segregated schoolings often puts people of color at disadvantage with severely underfunded schools, and it keeps from proper education. And like I know this because my school district that I go to is one of these districts. There's like a website that shows the racial divide, and like my school is on like the very high end of racial divide. And then the funding differences between my school and the other schools with other like higher white population is a lot different. So my school's at a severe disadvantage. And so like, at the end of the day, diversity is like, it's shown to be good at college campuses. It helps understand other perspectives, and it helps students learn better. And affirmative action, like it's because of a lot of Supreme Court cases and stuff, it has been refined. So it's not just a quota anymore. So like, I don't necessarily see it as a disadvantageous to me, more than that it seeks to help relieve the inequalities that still exist today. Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, like I don't trust my knowledge on affirmative action. I have not heard about like the topic in years. And honestly, like from a concept point, like I just don't like how there's like, it feels like a cap, right? Like it feels like a cap on percentages, and I don't think that's unfair to that. I don't think that's fair to anybody, honestly, because like it just needs to be, because that colleges need to have a better, more holistic view. Like they're all advertising, right? Like they need to be able to understand circumstances, understand different conditions, what you've gone through, how much you've tried. And I think that affirmative action, like it, from my like perspective and from what I know of it, at least it feels like a cap, and it just doesn't feel fair to like say like, oh, like I'm sorry, we can't accept any more of like this, or like we can't do that. I guess like this is probably outdated or flawed, but like in general, that's kind of my perspective on this type of thing. It just feels like by putting a number on it, it feels like you're limiting it in itself, right? Like why not just have the like increased percentage be more of like a holistic thing, like, oh, they came from this and they deserve a little bit more credit for that, and we should give it to them, like it feels like it should be part of a different thing, not its own thing, to me at least.
Okay, so first I wanted to say that along with Lance, I don't have a lot of background knowledge about affirmative action, and I also want to say that with things like this, I don't think there is a clear answer of like it's completely good or bad, but I feel like in some ways it is unfair to the Asian community because there is this kind of unsaid cap, and affirmative action is aimed to like make it a little more fair for people of low socioeconomic status, but there are also low income Asians as well. And there's just, like I mentioned earlier, it was very undeveloped, the thought. Asians as a race, there's a lot of rich Asians and there's a lot of poor Asians, and that gap is very wide. So when there's this unsaid cap, it makes it hard for low socioeconomic status Asians to get into elite colleges and things like that, especially like even if they're academically qualified.
From what I understand, it's not like that anymore. So like they don't really have as Lance was saying, there's not really a limit because of several like lawsuits against colleges over the like past 50 years. From what I understand, basically what they do now is instead of having quotas or percentages, like you said, they do holistic view, and they they don't just admit you if you're like just, I mean, if you're just poor or just a minority. Instead, they want to look at like if you participated in like uh more what do you call it, like activities that are diverse. So like they'll give you more like points, quote unquote, if you're like, if you were president of like some like Korean American association or some, I don't know what exists out there. Like I was part of the officers for the Black Student Union. So like they'll give you boost points on those, but they no longer do it just quota. Like they don't so basically, after a lot of cases, the Supreme Court ruled that it's illegal to have quotas, like vote against that. So like it's no longer that type of quota typed. But the problem that some people are bringing up now in this new version of like this more refined version of affirmative action, there's been evidence at like colleges at like Harvard that like Asians, like, so like they give you more points if you're based on like diversity, or like they also do this thing called like personality, and it was shown that like Asians were sort of discriminated in that personality category. So like the admissions officers would write like, oh, this Asian's just a standard, like he's smart but he's low, like doesn't have many like personality traits, or like is not very like exciting, it's like he's like standard. So that's sort of one of the problems they have. But from what I understand right now, it's not that bad. It's better than having quotas.
I also want to say that I think to an extent that the holistic review fails many students, and it's, I guess, depending on the institution and the person reading your application, it could be a myth in your case. You may never have gotten a holistic review. I did read a study, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it was more recent. Harvard, basically Asian Americans, or Asians in general, had higher test score requirements, I guess, Basically, they're expected to have higher scores, and Black people were expected to have lower scores, which there are also upper class Black people and lower class Black people. And I think they missed that. So they judge us all as being lower class, when we're all not. So there are some of us who have more resources and there's different cultural experiences. So I think in that way, the holistic review not completely, but fails many students. And also think about the geographic location, affirmative action. I'm not sure how much that takes into account, but I know, for example, for me, I'm in a small town, mostly white, like I said earlier, right beside a big town that's more diverse, but we're both in the same area. So I'm kind of lumped in with them, even though I don't have those resources. Those aren't my resources. My town has one high school, the city beside my city has a lot of other high schools, a lot more resources. So a lot more students who do perform well and get to the top schools. So I do feel like, I could be wrong, from my perspective, I think in that regard, it can be unfair. I'm not entirely sure how that's related to affirmative action, but I do think in a holistic review that's supposed to take geographic location into account. So I think there needs to be some workshopping with things like that, and concerning test scores for Asians, like looking at the actual income level of the individual rather than just completely judging them off of their ethnicity. The holistic review needs to be more holistic in action as well as title. That's my opinion on it.
I do, excuse me, want to make some comments because I do come from the same school as him, or I come from the same school as Prometheus. And I do feel as though, to a certain degree, we are underfunded, which is something that Ronnie brought up with his school. And there are a lot of opportunities that we don't have that other bigger cities do have. But another comment I want to make with the whole extracurricular activities and how that will give you a boost. Some lower income people don't have the ability to, do a whole lot of extracurricular activities. Like say for instance, if, my family, they all work and I don't have a ride to get me to and from all these different clubs, all these different, sports activities that I want to be a part of, that takes away from me being able to do those kind of things. And that's something that isn't, always counted into that. There's another thing I want to say. Now, I do think it affects, affirmative action affects people differently. You know, what I'm seeing is, there's a difference between how affirmative action affects Asian Americans versus how it affects Black Americans. See, I see it as a more beneficial thing because I do understand that there are certain opportunities that Black people do not have, and there's this, cycle of poverty, and like some people, some Black people need that extra push to get them out of the position that they're in. Some people feel as though, oh, like the only way I'm going to get out of this position that I'm in right now is to get some kind of like sports scholarship if I'm, throwing the ball or I'm doing football or something, but not all of us have the ability to do that. I can't play a sport. So, you kind of need that little push. And I think some people have this notion that with affirmative action, it's just like, oh, I'm getting in because I'm Black and not because I deserve that position. Or, they think meritly I didn't deserve the spot that I got, when in actuality, there's likely what happened was, meritly I'm at the same position as somebody else. But, like certain positions that I'm in, socioeconomic status or my race status is what kind of like me that spot over someone else. It's not necessarily that I was at a lower position than this person and I got in over them.
I don't really have much to say. I don't really know what to say, but I think it should really be like more of a mixture of the two, of like a more holistic approach with mixed in with affirmative action, because like said earlier, some people without that extra cushion, they can't get into a school that may actually be right for them. Like, some students, they want to part, like some for Black kids, like, well, really for any kids who don't have money to pay for it, honestly, is the point, is that if they want to participate in gymnastics, but they don't have money to either buy their shoes, their outfit, even for them to just go to a gym and practice, they can't do that. And now they're seen, now when they do their college application, they're looked at as someone who didn't take initiative, or someone who didn't take electives to, like, be more well-rounded other than just a student who does academics. And so I feel like in order to, I'm not quite sure, I just feel like it needs to be a little bit more holistic so we can find out the reason behind first, and then with the reason behind it, it can even be just written on the application. Why, I mean, I know there probably already is, like in depth, why didn't you do this, that, and the third, or why did you do this, that, and the third, and what helped you get to that spot, may be a solution, and, really help colleges gauge whether the student deserves that spot. And there's always going to be ways for people to cheat that system, but maybe it's a step closer. I don't really know.
And going back to what you said about the application, there was so much more that needed to go in my application that I did not have space to add. There's so many minor details. First of all, I didn't think some of these would be important until later on, but there's so many details that I didn't really have space to do it. Like, yeah, you can write an essay that could talk about who you are as a person, but what if what makes me a person is like a million different things and I have space for 5? You're missing out on, I can't count, but a lot of different details. So I do definitely agree with that. Like, there needs to be, I guess that's kind of unrealistic in a way, because you can only have so much space on the application, you only have so much time to read the application. But it's definitely, it has issues.
I wanted to say, I felt as though it was funny that Azaria, I think, was it Azaria or was it Timotheus that brought up the fact that like there needs to be an ability to say more. I know for me on Common App, when I was applying for my college, there was a section for me to add, like, a comment about my application. And even though I was in, a couple different clubs and extracurricular things and, band and all that jazz, I still felt as though I didn't have enough. So I actually wrote under that section kind of why I wasn't a part of more. And I don't even know if my college read it. I mean, I got in for some reason. But I did feel as though, you know, that was something important that they needed to understand, like why I didn't do, you know, why, you know, meritly I might be, you know, a great candidate, but, you know, in terms of, oh, you know, I didn't do a mission trip in Africa. I wasn't a part of this. I wasn't a part of that. But also, you know, applying for scholarships, that puts you at a disadvantage if you didn't have the resources to do a lot of different things that, you know, other people were able to do, or other people's parents were able to afford. And now, you know, you're put at a disadvantage because you don't have like an extravagant list of things you're a part of, but you might have been extensively a part of the things that you could do for free.
I do, like in my application, there was space to add extra details, and I did add details that I had space to add. But when you are able to write a book about all the crap you went through to get you to where you are now, it won't be enough. And that's why I understand why interviews are often not given as much weight. However, I got one interview. That interview allowed me to say things that I wasn't able to in my application. And imagine being able to say all those things that did not make it to the application, but them not to really consider it. You know, like I understand it because you could have someone biased against or for a certain applicant, but I think in some cases, going back to the whole holistic review type thing, certain systems help some people more than they help others. I'm not sure exactly how you would solve that.
So honestly, with the whole college application process, I mean, I don't know how it could be made better, but it's a super hard process to, like, you know, determine whether the student can actually thrive or is, you know, a good match for the school when you have over thousands, sometimes almost 1 million students who want to be at your place of education. And
Mhm.
I don't know how to make that process better for students, because like for a student like me, academically, I'm not the best, but I did so much community-based wise, and I jumped at almost every opportunity and to just do more things in the community, whether it was like simply like volunteering for work or going on a trip. Like I hopped at the opportunity. And honestly, when I applied for like my applications, and like a school was like, yeah, we don't want an essay, that honestly scared me, because I'm like, how am I supposed to show that I am me when all you look at for now is my grades? Like grades, I mean, for some students, I mean, it really depends on the student. A student may not care about cheating and they will cheat to get the grades they want. A student who takes pride in their grades will work hard. And so how is the college supposed to know that which student is which? And you know, so I feel like the whole process of, like, you know, application process for colleges should be reevaluated and made into something different. I don't know where that starts with, but that's my answer to like this whole, not my answer, but like my tidbit really.
Said, for me, I use the Common App mostly, and you have like 650 words to explain any like other circumstances outside of your main essay. And I just want to say, like, 650 words is not enough to explain your entire life situation and everything you've gone through, because those situations and circumstances you were put in affect you way more than any few points can account for. And on top of that, it seems like, especially within like Westbridge culture, you either have to be, if you're privileged, you have to do all of these things and to get into top colleges. But if you are disadvantaged in a lot of ways, it's like the more oppression points you have, the better to excuse what you haven't done. And it shouldn't be that way, because even those that don't have the most oppression points, they still had a lot of restrictions and boundaries that they couldn't overcome yet, if that makes sense.
650 words is like, it's not enough to say why you can't do this, that, and the third, or why you couldn't overcome a certain thing, because like Beryl was saying, almost one action or one thing in your life can affect, like the butterfly effect, that can affect, one thing here can affect you 10 years down the road. Like you deciding to not go to this certain middle school and meeting this certain team and realizing ... for your passion to have your passion for basketball or something. I don't know. This isn't hypothetical, but like, 650 words cannot explain that one butterfly effect that affected you for your life, and the small decisions you made to make you into who you are.
Yeah. Basically that's it. There's like a whole timeline I have to sit here and break down for you in the 650 words. You know what? Because my family, for example, we're in this town that really didn't, I think it didn't stop segregation until 10 years after it was law. So we're still dealing with that sort of thing from way back when. People might look at our town or look at me in this place thinking, oh, that was centuries ago. It should be over. No, like, yeah, to an extent, yeah. But we're still dealing with those sorts of things. Not everyone's gonna be dealing with it. Of course, people from bigger cities, I assume, higher income, Black people might not have those same issues. An assumption people make. I actually had someone tell me that was centuries ago. How are you still dealing with that? And I try to explain to her the whole timeline, which you obviously don't have time to do on the college app, or even I did Questbridge too. So even Questbridge, you really don't have all that space to do it. I tried my best. There's still so much more that I could have added. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the last question. For those of you out there who are not up to date with current events, one of the most trending topics across the internet is that of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. Mr. Arbery was a 25-year-old Black male who was out jogging in Brunswick, Georgia, only to be chased down and shot to death by father and son duo, Gregory and Travis McMichael. The video of the tragic event has gone viral, and many have signed petitions and joined protests to honor Mr. Arbery and ensure that justice is truly served. So my question for you all, the final question, what are your overall feelings towards the Ahmaud Arbery case as they relate to racial discrimination? And how do you think the case's publicity has contributed to its progress thus far in regards to the guilty parties already being arrested and charged with murder?
So I'm gonna start with the case's publicity. How do you say it?
Publicity.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like the publicity of the case, still feel like I'm not saying that right, is what got those men in jail. For a lot of cases and people, it's they don't go to jail until it comes to light because everyone's pushing for it. But if it never came to light, they would be about their day because the court system or whoever let them go free doesn't care enough about what has happened, honestly. So they're just letting them go free because they don't care. And if it never came to light, these people will still be roaming around the streets. And and I feel like the reason why it took so long is because his family never stopped fighting for justice. And I feel like that is the key point and why they did get justice in the end point, because if they never stopped, then Ahmaud would just been another pointless Black boy killed or Black man killed that no one's cared for, no one's paid attention to. And it's honestly, like I said earlier, like way earlier, I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed that we have to have this keep happening. And, it's the same thing. We keep protesting, we keep giving prayers and giving you wishes and saying we care about you and hope you're getting through this well, but that's not enough at this point. And honestly, that's all I can say right now.
What are my overall feelings? I feel a lot of anger, and I know you said that it was the media coverage and publicity that got them in jail. Well, I need that to affect how they will be charged, because I know, it's not for now. It's not enough for them to just get arrested. Like, I need them to serve time. Like, I need them to be sitting in there for a long time. like, maybe even, life, because they deserve that, because they shot that man in cold blood, period. And like, I know like police respond to media coverage, but the problem is not every Black man that's getting shot or every Black woman that's getting shot is getting this same media coverage. And I need them to keep that same energy. Like, I don't need them to go looking for a suspect just because like that person who was killed is trending on Twitter. I need them to always put that same energy into how they treat Black crime. Period. Like I don't know. It's just it bothers me, of course, because of their motivation, and they thought they were justified in shooting this man and like essentially hunting him, like deer, like he was game. Yeah, I find it extremely disrespectful, especially when you when you think of violence towards the Black people, whether it be police brutality or not, you know you know now he's being unjustly killed, and we have to keep that into perspective when we're talking about well, maybe this person had real motivation, maybe he thought he was in danger, but he wasn't, though. And that's the problem. Like we have to think about it in the perspective of what if we are actually losing someone close to us. And it reminds me of this case where it was a white woman, she was a police officer. She walked into this man's house and shot him while he was just eating his ice cream or something. And like the family was so sympathetic towards this woman and saying, oh, we forgive her for shooting our brother, shooting our son. That is a level of forgiveness I could never have. Like, I'm sorry, like even though these people have been arrested, I don't feel like justice has been served yet. And I'm still waiting for that. And I'm waiting for justice for a lot of Black people. And sometimes we just don't get that. We need to change. We need to change that, period. Like I guess that's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, it gets me a little heated because I have a Black mother. I have Black siblings. I have a nephew. And I don't want, I'm a Black woman too, and I don't want to feel like I'm in danger. And then there's people on the internet that are justifying me getting killed innocently because I look like somebody else, when in actuality I'm just being Black in my own skin. I was just to look like somebody else. I was just born to look like a thug. I was just born to look like whatever stereotype that.
And honestly, I'm disappointed with my reaction to it. Not disappointed with myself, but disappointed with the fact that I had this reaction, simply because it was awful. I thought it was horrible, like everyone hopefully thinks, but I was not surprised at all. Because my entire life, that possibility has always been my reality. I grew up having to keep my head down in certain scenarios. And I actually, if I'm being honest, I developed, and not necessarily this is completely related to it, but I'm going to like police brutality type thing. I have like an anxiety with police officers. Just seeing a car, just walking by one, doing absolutely nothing, I get anxious. And because that's always been my reality, the possibility of me dying for doing nothing but living has always been a fear of mine. So, but I do appreciate, and I kind of think this kind of contradicts some earlier statements that were made concerning racism between Asians and Black people. In reference to China, the discrimination in China, I saw a general consensus to get these men arrested, charged, and hopefully convicted of just about everyone, So I do think that it is there. I also want to question the people who made these comments mentioned earlier. Where are you looking for that support? That's all I want to say on that.
It's nothing new, but it's so sad that this has to be like the reality for a lot of people nowadays, that this is that we have to wake up in fear about whether our brother has to go to school and whether he will be shot, killed, or harassed in any way for simply just wanting to get his education. And like the thing is about this chart is just that when they try to justify it, I don't understand how they try to justify it. And when they do, like when they're justifying it, they're basically what it all boils down to is saying, in my opinion, how I see it is what they're saying is that since me as a person, I value myself more, therefore I'm above this person who is Black. So therefore, even though I did commit a crime that took this person's life away, I should still be valued more. And like that's the mindset a lot of these people have that really just irks me. Is like if this person killed a white person in the same way, shape, form, you would still want them to go to jail. So the fact that they have this mindset of looking at Black people as like, you know, like how Kanaya said it, as game. Like we're not animals, we're not less than you, we're not a different species, we're human. So therefore you shouldn't be looking down at us. And therefore, since you're looking down at us, you value us less than you, and you still see it as justifiable to kill someone in cold blood like that.
Zaria said, I don't think we should not need media coverage for the justice system to do what it needs to do. And I think this case in this conversation just highlights everything wrong, or some of the things wrong with the justice system. And I think there's an imbalance of power there that needs to be checked, but I'm not sure how we're gonna fix that.
So like, yeah, obviously, yeah, this is it's a terrible incident, and as Timotheus was saying, like you don't find trust with the police, around the police. And you know, with given the developments in the past 10 years with like incidents with the police, and then now we see that not only did the police ignore to not arrest these people, but we see like, I think it was like 2 months, a little more than 2 months pass before any like charges were even given out. And that shows like the amount of basically corruption in the justice system, not just like the surface level of like police, but like with the whole department and the whatever, whoever just like decided not to give out charges. I don't know, you know, that sort of shows like regardless, it's not improving the situation that of the mistrust with the justice system and police, and rightfully so. Like if you decide to wait 2 months before you even arrest these people, that's outrageous, and it's beyond messed up, and that shows how bad the system is right now. You know, and there's like people who are saying, oh, it's not that bad, it's all equal now, and then you see something like this, and then obviously you can't, I mean, some people try to justify this somehow, but you can't ignore it at that point.
Honestly, like what everyone else has said is just all I can really say about it, besides just chip in how I am also very frustrated that something like this even had to have happened. And the fact that media coverage is, again, another key component in making sure that this like got at least like the beginning of the justice it deserves. It just doesn't feel right. And honestly, like it shows the flaws of our system today. And like as the younger generation, I think it's just something that we need to build upon and take as our motivations for moving forward and bringing about the change that we want to see, so we don't ever have to like see this again, right? Where a crime or like this type of incident ever occurs where someone is unjustifiably murdered or accused, and we need the backing of society and media coverage in order to get that done, instead of having it already managed by the time it gets out, right? But yeah, again, just general frustration along with everyone else.
Going to point out is the fact that earlier when I was actually looking into this case and I typed in his name, one of the like Google, you know how they have the popular recommendations for, kind of fill in the blank of what you're trying to say. It had the man's name, I don't want to mispronounce it, and then it had criminal record, as if people were searching for a reason for him to get shot. And I feel like that speaks to how people want to justify this slaying of this African American man, when that's a extreme flaw within America, period. It kind of reminds me of the fact that you go back to some of the earliest cases of one of the huge cases with Emmett Till, starting the civil rights movement. Emmett Till never whistled at that white woman. She even said it years later, when she was on her deathbed, she professed that he never whistled at her, and yet he's sitting 6 feet under because of it. Like now you're searching for a reason, to say, oh, well, maybe he did do the robbery, maybe he did have some kind of criminal record, and that was the reason for why, they slayed him. And it's just like, history forever repeating itself.
Another thing that adds to the case about, I don't know how to say his name, the one where he got shot down, I'm being very clear, but the case we're speaking on right now, it took an officer from Atlanta's district, where the place of his killing was in Rayquois, which is like it's nowhere near Atlanta. And the fact that it took someone from Atlanta, because this case kept getting tossed to a different person and then tossed to another person because no one wanted to handle it, specifically because of the relationship they had with the person that killed this young man, is just very it's sad that it had to get tossed and tossed and tossed. And I know there's like probably somewhere where you're not supposed to get involved in cases that are personal to you, but 2 months is too long for this case to just keep rolling and rolling and rolling until someone's willing to take on this case with this much history behind it and this much weight to it. And so that's another thing that makes me a bit more frustrated about it.
I think this conversation has definitely highlighted the fact that racism is a systemic issue. It's not just one person is racist or a group of people are racist, but racism infiltrates into every field, whether that's the justice system or healthcare or anything else. And we're all collectively frustrated and kind of confused on what the next steps are to change this. But I think it's really important for us to bring awareness to these kind of things, as well as expose ourselves to different types of people and having the uncomfortable conversations that other people don't want to have. And I'm open to like listen to what other people have to say about changing this racism in our society.
To wrap it up, to sum it up, basically it's a system issue. So only way I can see that changing, it's going to be distant in the future from what I can tell. Who knows, maybe Corona, because I think Corona, from what I can tell, has kind of taken like a lot of racism that has been hidden. People have let loose via social media, via TikTok. So I do think coronavirus has sparked change in more ways than just mortality rates, more ways than just mortality rates. So yeah, I think the only way to really change the system is to break the system that's already here, start all over again. With that being said, we're pretty much done.
A great talk, stimulated a bunch of good thoughts and conversations, and talks like this should be placed in every situation ever. I don't know, workplace, at jobs. I said workplace already.
I just want to say that this is like the most educational and intellectually stimulating thing I've done like all of quarantine. So
That's true. That's too true.
Like I really enjoyed this, to be honest with you. I'm gonna say that I'm not in real life, you guys. It's my lamp and the lighting.
Thank you, Ronnie.
I gotta check out.
All right. Well,
All right. See ya.
See y'all.
All right, thank
It's
you.
really
guys.
interesting.
let's
See ya.
All right, that's all for the discussion. If you like the video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends and or via social media. If you have any opinions that you would like to share, leave a comment down below. If you'd like more information on the topics we discussed during the panel, feel free to check out the links in the description. I will also be leaving my Instagram handle in the description if you have any specific questions or like to keep up with any possible updates. With all that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. We hope that you were able to walk away from this panel with a fresh, more informed perspectives on situations that we discussed. Thank you. Bye.